But anyhow, too much information. Yeah, so it just shows that there's really a lack of willingness for anybody to stand up to these bullies at this point, okay? And Hitler's going to take note of this, all right? And he knows that British, the French, are not willing to step up, okay? And we're going to find that out. He's going to test the waters, okay? So you got Italy on the warpath, you got Japan on the warpath, okay? And then I did talk about this yesterday in the video. I need to kind of cover this briefly again because fourth hour, I didn't quite get through the Spanish Civil War. So I just want to mention this again. It was illegal under American Neutrality Acts for U.S. citizens to go fight in somebody else's war. That was one of the things we did in the 1930s that we'll talk about. And so what generally, if Americans wanted to go fight against fascism in Europe, generally what they would do is they would go to Canada, they would get a fake passport saying that they were Canadian citizens and then go fight. And so we had a whole brigade of Americans called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade that fought against the fascists in the Spanish Civil War. And then I mentioned that the first American to die in World War II, once it became World War II, was an American civilian pilot that got fake papers, went to Canada, and went and flew for the Royal Air Force in the Battle of Britain in 1940. Okay, so that's the first documented American death in the war. Okay, so there were passions in America for some people that saw what was happening and said, we need to stop this. But the United States is an isolationist country at this point. You ask the man on the street, should we get involved in what's going on over there? Okay, and this is even after, France falls and Britain is under attack. That the American people are like, no, it's not our business. We need to stay out of it. Okay, so the level of isolation in this country is extremely high. Okay, now, one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is really to study this map. Okay, this is an important map, which, guys, I have to pass these out. Okay, I need to end 5 minutes early today. Okay, so not at 10:20, guys, stop me and I'll explain this, but I'm going to hand these out. Actually, I explained it on the assignment, I sent you guys. I just didn't want to forget this because they're not really kicking myself. Because I'd like to grade these over spring break, along with your book reviews. Okay. Don't worry about that. I'll explain it all. Okay, so look at this map. Okay, so Germany. All right, so this region of Germany, the Rhine River runs right here. This is a demilitarized zone. Germany is not allowed to put any troops there. And I talked about this with the Treaty of Versailles, the $33 billion that Germany owed, the Allies. The French, during the 1920s, sent troops into here and took coal as payment by force at gunpoint. Okay, so Germany is, by 1936, out of the Depression. Okay, and people back home in the United States are looking at this, and soon the world is going to get to see what Hitler has done to transform Germany when he hosts the Berlin Olympics in 1936. Okay, so when the people from around the world, the news cameras come in and everything, they're going to see a modern city in Berlin. Okay, you're not going to see any homeless on the street. You're not going to see unemployed. It's a beautiful city. He starts to build a highway system that the Romans would be proud of. Okay, you guys know what this is called, the highway system there in Germany? The Autobahn, you've heard of this? Okay, and I've driven on the Autobahn, and it's nice. It's a lot like our highway system. If you get on the Kansas Turnpike or the Oklahoma Turnpike, big highway system. They do have speed limits. Some people, but they're fast. I mean, you can drive fast on the Autobahn. And my wife and I rented a car, and drove down to Austria. And so we were on the Autobahn for a while, and I was in a little rental car. And, you know, you had Beamers and Mercedes just like flying by you on the Autobahn, okay? But anyhow, so people are going to be pretty amazed at what Hitler has done. And that's why you see things like, you know, the NRA in the United States where people are like, this fascism works. Let's try it here. Like I said before, fascism is not a dirty word in the 1930s, the early 1930s. It's not. Hitler is praised for what he does. Yeah, he doesn't like Jews, but you know what? I don't really like Jews either. So what's the big deal? I mean, that was the attitude of a lot of people. You understand? So the 36 Olympics is really like a chance for Hitler to show off how great his country is, okay, and how good the Germans are. And so now, we have any track people in here? Track stars? You guys know about the 36 Olympics? A little bit? Okay. One of the most amazing stories in Olympic history is the 36 Olympics, okay? Because Hitler is espousing this racial superiority of the Aryan race, right? And what better place to showcase that superiority than on the athletic fields, okay? Now, if you're a fan of the Olympics, take note that the host country during the Olympics generally does very well. Okay, so when the Canadians host, obviously Winter Olympics, they do very well. The Germans are going to do very well in the 36 Olympics. But there's going to be an American that's going to steal the show. Who is that American?
Jesse Owens.
Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens is the son of sharecroppers, descendants of slaves from Decatur, Alabama. Okay? When he was in middle school, Jesse Owens and his family moved north, like a lot of African Americans did. And he moved to Ohio. First Indiana, then Ohio. And when he was in middle school, there was a track coach that encouraged Jesse to come out for middle school track. And they both realized quite quickly that Jesse was an incredible athlete. And so through high school, by the time he was a senior in high school, he was breaking world records. Okay. And so then he went to The Ohio State University. Okay. And that was about the time the Olympics began. Okay. And now, Jesse Owens, as an African American, in 1936 in the United States, was treated in many places, even Ohio, as a second-class citizen. Okay. Now, there was a movie that came out a few years ago called Race. And you guys see that? It's about Jesse Owens. Okay. And in this movie, I've seen a couple different movies on Jesse Owens, but in this movie, they talk about the African American community, some of the elites in the community, putting pressure on Jesse Owens not to go to the Olympics, to boycott the Olympics because of the treatment of African Americans in this country. Okay, he decided to go. All right, and I don't know how much of that was Hollywood or playing with it, but he decided to go. And Jesse Owens won not one, not two, not three, but 4 gold medals. Okay, and he was competing against Germany's best athlete in the 100 meters, the 200 meters, the long jump, and the 400 relay. Jesse Owens wowed the crowd. Okay, whatever your profession is or whatever you're really into. So like, Kate, if you ever had the chance to meet somebody, say like, Enrico Fermi, that's the first to split the atom. Okay, you would be in awe of meeting this individual. Or Oppenheimer, right? I mean, it'd be like, holy cow, right? I'm in the presence of greatness in my field. The same thing could be said for athletics, right? Like when you're around greatness, you are in awe. So the people, the German athletes, the German people were in awe of Jesse Owens. So when he took the field, guys, they cheered. Hitler's in the stands. This is a black man that in the eyes of Adolf Hitler and his ideology is subhuman. You understand? And his best athletes are superior to all others. And Jesse Owens is going to throw that back in Hitler's face in front of the German people. Which, what could be more fantastic than that? You know what I mean? Hitler would shake the hands and congratulate all the gold medalists. But he would not shake Jesse Owens' hand. Okay, and Hitler was enraged that his best athlete, Lutz Long, lost to Jesse Owens. Okay, in fact, Jesse Owens and Lutz Long became good friends. Okay, which really pissed off Hitler. And at the end of the Olympics, by the time the war kicked off, Lutz Long was forced to go into the infantry. This is one of their greatest athletes. And he will die in World War II in the infantry as punishment for befriending Jesse Owens. Okay. So I want to show you a video. Come on. You turn off on music.
Owens liegt zum Baum, Landslides ruft ihn, Rosenberg kämpft sich an. Mit Erfolg, Ziel. Zielwurf im 100 Meter Lauf, ist er oben.
Oh, that was the end. Sorry. Let me go back to the beginning.
Included in the first ever Olympic Games held in 1896 in Athens, Greece.
Bester Läufer, Mr. Owens ist am Start.
So I think this is just the. Yeah, that's like the whole race there. You can see the crowd. This is the one I want to show you. You already saw it.
It is not only a tally of medals which turns a champion into a hero. There's one man who will exemplify the ultimate Olympic hero. It is America's Jesse Owens. His achievements, though equal since in the record books, are as remarkable for the dignity and grace with which they were performed as for the barriers they broke. Archie Williams was Owens' teammate in 1936 and the winner of the 400 meters.
I guess I would call him the Superman of the team, and everybody knows that. But I mean, I felt that he was one of the many.
Surrounded by Nazi propaganda and its doctrine of Aryan superiority, Owens became the dominant figure of the 1936 Games in Berlin. He was cheered every time he entered the stadium and treated like a star. He was, after all, the fastest man in the world, black or white. Owens won the 100 meters with relative ease from his teammate Ralph Metcalfe. The 200 meters saw a bigger margin of victory, breaking the Olympic record by almost half a second. He completed the sprint treble by helping the American 4x100 meter relay team to a 12-yard victory with a world record that would stand for 20 years. His fourth gold medal proved to be more of a battle.
He was so good. He never practiced a long time. I don't think he practiced enough, because some of the times he would foul out, or he would always miss qualifying because he didn't have a step down.
Owens almost failed to qualify for the long jump, until his main rival, the German Lutz Long, suggested that he move his mark back and make sure of a safe, legal jump. Once in the final, Owens and Long battled it out in front of a strongly partisan crowd. When Long actually equaled Owens' jump, the German crowd erupted in excitement. Owens responded with an even longer lead, then sealed his victory with a new Olympic record with his final jump. In front of Hitler and the 100,000 crowd, Lutz Long was the first person to congratulate Owens, cementing a friendship that was to last until Long was killed at the Battle of San Pietro in 1943. Recalling his feelings at the time, Owens later said, "You can melt down all the medals and cups I have, and they wouldn't be a plating for the 24-carat friendship I felt for Lutz Long at that moment."
Yeah, pretty cool. Owens, you know how a lot of our Olympians will cash in on that fame? You know, like they're amateur athletes, so they don't get paid. So whether it be like Michael Phelps, the swimmer, you go on the Wheaties box and you do commercials and you cash in on that. You know what I mean? That never really happened for Jesse Owens. Okay, and it's kind of ends up being a sad story. The TV networks used to do like afternoon specials on different people and so forth. And the Jesse Owens story, which is kind of hard to find, I used to show it in February in Black History Month. But he never, he wasn't a really good student. You know what I mean? So like at Ohio State, he never graduated. And so he ended up taking jobs. I mean, he was like a Goodwill ambassador. He worked at the Boys and Girls Clubs in places like Cleveland, Ohio. And at one point later in his life, he got audited by the IRS. And it wasn't like Jesse Owens was rich. He was far from rich. And he had gone something like 3 or 4 years without paying any taxes. And so he went to trial, and the judge asked him. He said, "Jesse, well, how come you haven't been paying your taxes?" And he just kind of claimed like, "Well, I don't know." And then Jesse said this. He said, "Your Honor, I feel like I've already paid my debt to America." And the judge said, "Jesse, you're right." And so he let him off. Okay. But it's kind of sad that such a celebrated man never really got to achieve any level of comfort in life and be able to really benefit for what he did for his country, financially, being able to be secure. He never became that. So I like to talk about Jesse Owens just because, the symbolism of it during the Berlin Olympics and this friendship between these two men and so forth is well, it's a pretty neat story. Okay. And so, yeah. All right. But Hitler is going to take advantage of this. All the good press and media and so forth from this, from the Olympics. Get my mouse right here. Okay, and so in 1936, he's going to send troops into the Rhineland. Okay, after the Olympics, he's going to send troops in there in violation of the Treaty of Versailles into the demilitarized zone. Everybody with me on that? Now, at the time, you might expect France to counter that. To like send troops into the Rhineland and say, no, Hitler, you're not doing this. Okay. He had a limit of 100,000 placed on him for the military. 100,000 max in the military, the army. And when they sent troops in, Hitler gave orders to his general. He said, if the French show up, retreat, do not engage. Did the French show up? They did not. So Hitler's testing the waters to see what he can get away with. Okay? And secretly, he's violating the Treaty of Versailles in other ways. He's building an air force, the Luftwaffe, which he's not allowed to do. Okay? He's rebuilding his navy, which is going beyond the limits set by the Treaty of Versailles. Okay? So the other thing mentioned on this map right here is the Sudetenland. Okay, this is territory that was stripped of Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. And there's about 3 million people of German ancestry living in this area. Okay, now the Alps run across this border. So it's a natural barrier between Czechoslovakia and Germany. Okay, so the Czechs feel safe behind the Alps here, okay, but things are going to change. And then this is Austria down here. These are all going to be important to the future of these slides, okay? All right, we're going to come back across the pond for a little bit, okay, and talk about American foreign policy. I don't know if you guys remember the Stimson Doctrine under Hoover that said we would stay out of Latin America's business. You know, we've kind of been a bully. And I told you that Roosevelt would double down on this with the good neighbor policy, okay? Respecting the rights of other nations, this will become Latin America's policy to keep our military out of Latin America, handle their own problems, and this will improve relations with our neighbors, okay? This is smart. Especially as the clouds of war start to grow, the United States, a two-ocean nation, Western Hemisphere, if we can have friendly relations with everybody in the Western Hemisphere, then we don't have to worry about invasion except for across the ocean, okay? So by this time, guys, Roosevelt, they have a presidential plane. I don't think they call it Air Force One yet. But Roosevelt will be the first president of the United States to get in an airplane and fly to another country and meet with another head of state. And the first country he does that is with Mexico. Okay, so he's going to fly down to Mexico, meet with their president. Now, you would not probably see a political cartoon like this today, obviously. You got, you know, the president of Mexico wearing a sombrero here, okay? People would probably take offense to that today. Okay, and this says he, good neighbor, goes visiting. Okay, so Roosevelt trying to be a good neighbor. Okay. All right, so with that, other American policies. Okay, our relationship with Japan is somewhat strayed here. Okay, remember our immigration policies with Asians. I mean, we basically said no Asians were allowed to immigrate to the United States, okay, which is an affront to the Japanese, okay? Now, the League of Nations had condemned Japan for Manchuria. Japan left the League of Nations. They outlawed them, whatever that means, In 1937, they continued to attack China. Again, nobody's going to step up and protect the Chinese or the Ethiopians or anybody else. Nobody's willing to step up here, okay? So we're worried about our own depression, 1937. We've got our own problems. We're not going to get involved. And we're really not going to punish Japan either with economic sanctions or anything like that, because we're trying to avoid conflict. We're trying to remain neutral, okay? Even though some of these people are our good friends. So neutrality will be a theme here throughout the 1930s. Okay, in 1937, there's an incident that's going to involve the United States, okay? Now, if you don't know your geography very well, this right here, guys, is the Yangtze River. Okay, it's the third largest river in the world as far as the amount of water it carries. All right, and the United States, just like in Latin America, we have business interests in China during this time period. Okay, so you're wondering, why would a U.S. gunboat be in China on the Yangtze River in 1937? Well, it was to escort American cargo ships up and down the Yangtze and back out into the sea, okay, out here through Shanghai, okay, and as you know, Shanghai has been attacked as well by the Japanese, and on this fateful day, on December 12, 1937, this American gunboat, you see the gun on the front, American flag flying on the rear, this boat is attacked by the air and from the coast of the river, the banks of the river, I guess you would say, by the Japanese. Okay, this ship will eventually sink, but 2 Americans are going to die and 46 are wounded by this attack. Okay, now if I transpose this to 2021, and we're in the Persian Gulf, an American naval vessel comes under attack by the Iranians today, what would our response most likely be? Or an immediate response. Cruise missiles and so forth. Okay. What's interesting to look at here is the response of both our government and the American people. Okay. So here the Japanese apologized, said it was a mistake. Are we going to believe that if the Iranians tell us that today? No. Okay. And so the Americans will accept that apology. The Japanese offer $2 million to the families of the dead and wounded. And the American people are like, hey, why are we in China? Why do we have people over there? We need to get out of there. Otherwise, we're going to get drawn into a conflict. Okay? So I want to bring up a term with you that's another important term along with isolationism during the 1930s. And that is this term. Appeasement. To define appeasement would be to say that you give up your principles in order to avoid conflict. Is appeasement. Giving up your principles in order to avoid conflict. We're going to see this time and time again in the late 1930s. Okay? When the French failed to send troops in to enforce the Treaty of Versailles into the Rhineland, the French are using what? Appeasement. They're giving up the principle of enforcing what is the law to avoid conflict. Okay? Now, the Panay incident, for some, could be seen as appeasement, our lack of response to it. is to say, you can sink our ship and apologize and offers money. We'll accept that and avoid conflict. Follow me? Now, I do this all the time. Well, not all the time, but I do this in my marriage. Kate, I don't know if you have a girlfriend or ever had a girlfriend, but if you did, sometimes you may come up with a disagreement, right? And rather than have a fight, which I know I'm right, I'm in a disagreement with my wife. I know I'm right, but I know if I win that argument, she's going to be mad. Not for one day, but for multiple days. And when mom is not happy, nobody's happy, right? So sometimes I'll find myself just giving in to the argument. So yeah, you're right. To avoid conflict. Yes? Now, Kate, this is not healthy for a relationship. You need to be honest and have communication in a relationship, right? In other words, you need to stand up for yourself. So do I sometimes, right? You got to pick your battles, all right? So here, we're going to pick our battles carefully, but more times than not, you're going to see appeasement because people do not want to go to war, all right? And so the problem is going to grow. It's just like a bully, right? When you're a freshman and this big kid comes along and says, hey, that looks good, and takes it from your lunch, and you don't do anything about it. You don't report it. You don't stand up to the bully. What happens next time? Next thing you know, he's taking your lunch money. Okay? So this is a lesson that I think we have to look at today, you know, and looking forward. And so that's something to keep in mind as we go through these notes, okay? Now, I kind of get off track on this a little bit because I like to talk about this. Back in 2009, China completed construction on the world's largest dam called the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River right here, okay? This is a mountainous area. It's a valley, and so they built a dam right here, okay? The Yangtze is known for killer floods, as like the Mississippi has throughout history had killer floods. Have you guys heard of this dam? Three Gorges Dam? It's really, it's an amazing marvel. Now, one of the benefits the Chinese get from this is hydroelectric power, okay? This dam is almost a mile long, okay? It sits 500 meters above the seafloor, or the riverbed, okay? So I printed this off a few years ago, and I just think it's really interesting, especially for you, those that are interested in engineering, because this is the largest engineering project in history, okay? Start here. The dam started in 1994. The estimated cost of $90 billion. 20,000 workers. The river, when completed, would contain 27 million cubic meters of concrete and ship locks, 340,000 tons of rebar, 281,000 tons of metal. Once finished, the dam would be 175 meters, about 500 feet, and stretch almost 2 kilometers between the two banks. Okay. The effects of the dam. Now, since this is going to create a large lake or reservoir, the size of Indiana, this is massive, okay? Once completed, the dam will flood 28,000 hectares of crops and orchards, will submerge 13 cities, 40 towns, 300 villages, 1,600 factories will be submerged by this lake. As a result, 1.2 million people have to be resettled, moved. Largest resettlement project in history for a civil engineering project. Perhaps of even greater loss of land are the 100 plus historical sites that will be submerged, some dating back to 10,000 BC. The dam will control the floods, which is big, and that has already displaced 38 million people. Okay. It's destroyed 5.6 million homes and 12,000 acres of crops. But it will allow people to travel, large ships to travel further down the Yangtze to the Chongqing, which has about 380 million people in this region of China, okay, which is larger than the population of the United States, opening up markets. Problems with this: landslides, okay? Increased erosion in the reservoir may trigger large-scale landslides. Sedimentation: the reservoir will trap about 75% of sediments, causing dam and ship lock problems. Increased evaporation, water loss, because you're creating such a reservoir so big, so much of that will evaporate into the air, so you have less water. Loss of wildlife for you green people out there. Over 40 new wild animal species have been discovered in this area that's going to be submerged, including 12 mammal species, 21 bird species, 6 reptiles, 5 amphibians, as well as 4 species under state protection that reside in the gorge area. The golden monkey, the clouded leopard, spotted leopards, and golden eagles are all threatened there. These species may become endangered or even extinct. Okay? And then you have the dam safety. If something were to happen, like an earthquake, and this dam were to break, it would unleash a flood unlike the world has ever seen. Well, except for maybe Noah. Okay. Now, if we ever got into a conflict with the Chinese, we really wanted to hit them hard. I know, don't go there, right? So this is a pretty amazing thing. This has 27 hydroelectric turbines that water flows through. Okay, each one of those, it puts out enough electricity of a medium-sized nuclear power plant. These things are massive. Okay, so this is actually good for China in the sense of clean energy that doesn't pollute the air. You understand? So it's pretty good. Now, I know I need to stop and talk about the map, but I'll show this video on Thursday, okay? I'm going to stop.